I was on the corner of 20th and 2nd Avenue, which is now the new command post where they have relocated for the entire operations. I saw Governor Pataki, Mayor Giuliani. Everybody was being ushered into what was the police academy there for 1,200 new recruits who will be joining the New York City police force. That has now become the command center here, and that's where all the information is disseminating from.
That was Scott Haney reporting from New York on the morning of September 12th, 2001, less than 24 hours after two planes crashed into and knocked down the Twin Towers. Scott was one of more than a dozen members of the Channel 3 team who worked in New York in those days following the attacks. Kara Sunland was also there, as was photojournalist Mike Kopelman. All three are joining us to talk about their experiences. Kara and Mike are here in the studio with me, but I want to begin with Scott Haney, who's joining us remotely this morning. Scott, you were living in New York at the time. You're already working here at the station, but commuting in for your shift. So as a New Yorker, this attack happens and suddenly you're on a microphone talking about it. What was that experience like?
It was surreal, Eric. I got to be honest with you. I got a call from our news director, Deb Johnson. She said, "I know you're up on 88th Street, but is there any chance you can get down there?" So there was no transportation because they had basically stopped. There were no cabs. There was nothing. So I literally got on my rollerblades. I got down as far as 21st, which you just heard on that soundbite, and that's where the command center had been set up. So that's where I commenced my journey. And the folks from CBS 2 out of New York helped me get on the air for Channel 3. So it was an unbelievable scenario.
When you think back now, 20 years later, what's your biggest memory from that reporting stint there?
Just the help that people gave me from the CBS News team, because I went down there in a pair of shorts and on rollerblades. I didn't really expect to get on. I was just going to gather some information, but the help and the kindness and the camaraderie of the people that were all in that, citizens and people and just everyday people just walking up and asking what was happening, and it was just a surreal experience.
Here in the studio, we have Kara Sunland, photojournalist Mike Kopelman. Kara, we have a soundbite from your reporting. Let's take a look at that, and then I want to ask you some questions.
Likely, we won't know when America will act, or maybe not even where. But what we do know is that here at Ground Zero, at what was the World Trade Center, the casualties on our own soil continue to rise.
I remember thinking the same thing. I was in Washington reporting at the time, and everyone was thinking, so what's next? What's going to happen next? And that was your assignment there in those days following. What was it like being a reporter there?
I had only come to Channel 3 in 2000. This is 2001. I was a young cub reporter, and I felt grateful. I had people like Mike Kopelman and people around me, but we were told originally, you're going to stay near Connecticut because what if there are injured people? And then I was doing the morning show, and a bunch of firefighters from Fairfield got on, and my photographer Eric Hurst and I jumped on and said, we're going to follow them. And we ended up at Ground Zero, and I ended up staying there for the next 2 weeks or so and just reporting obviously on the biggest story of our lifetime. And I felt like we've heard before, the silver lining was so many people were trying to help. But as a young American, I was looking around going, is this America? New York City looked more like Beirut to me. It was just dust everywhere and not knowing what was going to happen next.
Mike Kopelman, you were there as a photojournalist, the eyes that brought our viewers to these locations like where Kara was. When you look back, and I know we have some pictures that you took that day and during that time to show our viewers, what's your biggest memory from being there?
My biggest memory is I've been going to New York my whole life. I lived in that area before I moved here to Connecticut. And it was just a different New York. There was a sense of community, even in the sense of tragedy, there was a sense of community, that people were there for each other. They were supportive. No matter who you were, no matter where you went, people were trying to help other people. I remember a line for the blood drive the next day because everybody just wanted to do something to help. The line just went around the block for people that wanted to donate, to help, to just help for the city and the country.
And in the Ground Zero area, I know we talked to Judy Keene earlier, and she said it was days before she got definitive word on her husband. There were so many people with pictures going there, and I know a lot of the journalists at that area were confronted by people, not in a bad way, but can you help me find my loved one, right?
I was, and people would come up to us, and we'd talk to them, and we'd take pictures of their pictures, we'd use them in our stories. At one point, somebody came up to me and said, "Are you a photographer?" thinking I was a newspaper photographer. And I said, "No, I'm a cameraman for a TV station in Connecticut." They thought I was being sarcastic, and they said, "This is no time for levity," and they walked away, and I was sort of stunned. But everybody just wanted to help, to do what they could to help everybody that was there.
I remember feeling the same way, people coming up and wanting to do something, and that people could see the Channel 3 mic flag, so there were Connecticut people coming up to us. I remember a man who was a doorman writing his phone number on his arm. He said he was going to go in and try and help find people, and saying he was writing his phone number and interviewing him, saying, I'm like, why are you writing your phone number? He said, just in case I don't make it out, I want them to call my mom. And it was just a sense of everyone was doing whatever they could, but we didn't know what that was going to be next.
Yeah, it was just such an uncertain time for everyone. Scott, I want to turn back to you just for a moment. We had Judy Keene on in our first segment, and of course, the Keene Family Foundation doing so much good for the community. Now, as we're 2 decades away from that day, do you think that's some of what people should take away from this on this anniversary coming up?
You know, Judy Keene turned a horrible tragedy into a sense of hope and accomplishment with her, with the foundation. And it is, out of tragedy comes some really wonderful things, and Judy Keene is the epitome of that. And I'm just so glad that I was able to forge a friendship with her out of this tragedy. I would not have known her if it weren't for this. So out of bad does come some good. And
Mike and Carrie, we have 30 seconds left. I'll just ask you this. On Saturday, what will be the thought you're thinking of?
I continue to talk to my kids about this, and for us, our life sort of changed. I mean, my husband and I were covering that together, and Dennis and I got engaged shortly after 9/11. So I think I want them to know the importance of what happened that day.
And I know there's a big story, but you came home and proposed to your wife.
I did. I walked around. I decided to stay there for one extra day, walking around as a citizen without the camera on my shoulder, and I saw this ring in a jewelry store. And I had what I call a Harry Met Sally moment, when I just decided that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with my girlfriend who I loved, and
You found that ring and you did it.
I did, and I proposed. 20 years later, we've been married for 18 years, and we have 2 kids, Max and Eli.
Good that comes out of bad. Thank you both for being with us. Scott, thank you for being with us as well. Coming up next, Mets manager Bobby Valentine on his experience helping New York and the world really find hope after the unthinkable happened in his city. We'll be right back.